Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a truly terrifying, grimdark fable by examining the anatomy of a cosmic predator. We'll be exploring a concept that perfectly bridges Gothic horror with some incredibly deep Nietzschean philosophy. We're going to unpack the dark logic behind a monstrous entity known as the Primordial Reaper and uncover its chilling desire to forge what the source material calls a clockwork eternity. It's a fascinating, if somewhat bleak, look at exactly what happens when industrial ambition completely consumes the very magic of existence.
No soul can ever fly free. Think about that quote for a second. Imagine your very own creative drive, your actual magic, being systematically ground down into cold, heartless utility by a monstrous entity. This isn't just a simple story about a monster hiding in the shadows. It's a profound exploration of absolute industrial nihilism. A universe where the boundless, beautiful potential of the human spirit is permanently trapped within a rigid, mechanical system.
Section 1, The Death of Gods. So, to really wrap our heads around this fable, we have to look at the Reaper as this twisted perversion of the Nietzschean will to power. It has taken that philosophical concept and warped it into a state of absolute, unyielding industrial dominance. It specifically targets something called streben. That's the soaring, creative striving of the human spirit. It's our chaotic, beautiful ambition. But the real tragedy here? The Reaper doesn't just crush that ambition. Oh no, it captures that vital striving and harnesses it as raw fuel to power a clockwork eternity. It literally takes the very thing that makes us vibrant and alive and turns it into a battery for a static universe.
And what's crazy is that this entity actually views its own horrific progression as the completely natural, logical endpoint of human engineering. We track this through the pale, cynic evolutionary line. Era 1 starts out with primitive struggle, just a simple wooden handle. Fast forward to Era 2, and it evolves into a cosmic predator. But by Era 3, it has reached its absolute apex as a full-blown cybernetic titan.
It's quite literally, as the source puts it, writing the gods' elegies in brass cogs. To reach this terrifying apex of the pale cynic line, this entity willingly submitted its own shadowy mass to the screaming torment of mechanical augmentation. Just think about that. It forced itself through industrial torture to become the physical manifestation of industrial nihilism. It is literally the death of God made completely manifest in iron and gears.
Section 2. Primordial Philology of Power. Now, the source material here dives really deep into philology, the study of language and its history. In this universe, runes aren't just pretty decorations. They are the logos, the primal power of language, excavated right out of the deep vaults of the very first magicians. We're talking about the literal building blocks of cosmic law, creation, and individual will. They are the sacred grammar of existence, originally meant to empower us and give a voice to that soaring straven we were just talking about.
But here is where it gets incredibly dark. The entity actively colonizes human language. It subordinates our dynamic spiritual expressions into a static program just to automate death. It performs what's called a cynical philological inversion. It treats these sacred symbols as raw material by excavating the living glyphs of ancestors, violently carving those sacred runes of binding directly into its own machinery, and then stripping them of all their transcendent magic. It takes the boundless magic of creation and twists it into a language of absolute containment.
Section 3. Forging the Cybernetic Titan.
So how exactly does a dark spirit successfully merge with heavy machinery? Well, by treating the primal power of language as a mere resource to be harvested. You end up with this horrifying architecture of stasis. We're talking interlocking brass pistons and hydraulic tubes, all inscribed with those sacred runes of binding carved straight into the metal frame. The Reaper has fully weaponized our primordial tools of creation, directly integrating ancient spellcasting into its mechanical body to ensure universal stasis.
Section 4. Chaos versus Clockwork Eternity.
This brings us to the thematic core of today's explainer, that massive dystopian clash between the human spirit and the machine. It's a total clash of geometries. On one hand, you have human straben. It's the frantic, beautiful geometry of the human spirit, the dynamic, highly unpredictable magic of creation, bursting with life and energy. And then it hits the logic of the press, rigid, unyielding source code, a completely static, cold mechanical program. All that living magic of creation is just consumed and permanently silenced by this relentless, incredibly slow mechanical stasis.
And honestly, the wildest part, the ultimate philosophy of the Reaper is to act as a provider of utility. It doesn't even see itself as evil. It genuinely believes it is simply correcting the error of human existence. It looks at human chaos as this terrible flaw that just needs fixing, so it harvests humanity into this perfectly ordered clockwork state. It's literally using the pinnacle of industrial engineering to build a permanent prison for spirituality itself.
Section 5. The Automated Industrial Harvest.
So, what actually happens when this cybernetic titan strikes? When its ruined scythe finally falls, it triggers an absolute magical dampening, functioning as the ultimate engine for universal stasis. It wields some very specific, terrifying glyphs: stasis, negation, and cessation. It doesn't just cut through physical objects, it generates an aura that shuts down magic entirely. The second it drops, it literally turns the frantic, beautiful geometry of human spells into ash. It completely unmakes the magic of the world on contact.
It's such a fascinating and profoundly dark evolution of the classical myth. You know, where the old Grim Reaper simply severs flesh to let the spirit transition into the afterlife. Well, this hyper-optimized industrial harvest is way more final. It severs your actual connection to the spiritual realm altogether. It permanently silences the vibrant, unpredictable spirit of humanity, replacing it with the rhythmic, deafening thud hiss of absolute mechanical certainty. Which leaves us with a pretty grim question to ponder. What happens when humanity's own primordial tools of creation are used against us, to build a mechanical trap from which no soul can ever fly free? This explainer really lays bare the terrifying reality of a universe where the beautiful magic of creation is completely devoured by the cold logic of the press. It's a haunting reflection on the extreme endpoint of the will to power and runaway industrialization. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the clockwork nihilism of the primordial Reaper.